everyone. It's such an honor to be at the opening session of the Planetiers, which is a beautiful, beautiful event that it's really gonna make a beautiful movement all around the world. It's an honor to be here. I'm Peace Ambassador of Brazil, and I have the honor to call on stage he who is the General Secretary of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. He's a lawyer. He's been the chief of the UN New York headquarters for 2 decades. It's an honor to have Satya Tripathi on stage.
Thank you so much, and a very warm welcome to this wonderful pavilion. It would have been nice if we had a few more people, but I was once in a conference, and so, not a conference, but I was going to speak at Princeton, actually. And so the professor who was receiving me, it was snowing very badly. And she said, Mr. Tripathi, I'm so sorry, we only have 5 students, because it is snowing so heavily that people couldn't come. Would you still speak? And I said, if there was one person in the room that I could influence, I'm going to speak. And of course, we have a lot more people than 5 people here, and each one of you is a champion. That's why you are here, but you can even be bigger champions if you want to be, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to speak about the power of partnerships. We know that the planet is burning from the west to the east, whether you talk about the bushfires in Australia, or the forest fires in Indonesia, or the wildfires in the US. Every year, the planet is losing tens of millions of acres of vegetation. The floods are everywhere, even in Europe, in my country, India, everywhere. Pakistan just recently had devastating floods, and all of it now scientists are telling us is all connected to climate change. And then, of course, the glaciers are melting, and we know that even just the Greenland ice sheet, if it melts completely, that will add 22 feet of sea level rise, just the Greenland ice sheet. And of course, scientists are also telling us that if you are worried about COVID-19 being a bad pandemic, it'll get much worse, because we don't know what is inside the glaciers. And once they melt and all those waters travel across the planet, we will have much worse pandemics waiting for us, for the other species on the planet. Now that, of course, can number us into inaction. We can get very afraid. We can get psychosis, as they call it. A lot of young people now don't want to have children, because they say, and this is not something I take lightly, and I have talked to those young people in many places, and they say, I don't want to bring a child to this terrible situation where there is no hope. But I think there is hope. And I'm going to share with you 3-4 stories of partnerships. Martin Luther King Jr., he's my favorite person, because even when he was in a very bad time and place, go back 50, 60 years, and he had this great speech, remember? I have a dream. He had no reasons to tell people he had a dream, but he was a very smart person, a very smart public leader to connect with people. You can't scare people into action. You can inspire people into action. So he said, I have a dream. And look where we are now. Look at his dream then and now. A few years ago, you had the first African-American president of the United States. You now have Tanzanian Indian origin British Prime Minister that is just being sworn in as I speak. So the dream does come true. And that's the kind of dream we need to have in terms of climate action, in terms of environmental protection. Because everything we know, everything we love, is unraveling at warp speed. If you love being in this magical room, you should be very worried. If you loved the outsides, you should be very worried. Because in about 7 to 15 years' time, it's all going to unravel. Because in nature, everything exists, whether it's a certain climate zone or agroclimatic zone or a microclimate or a macroclimate, everything exists in a range of tolerance, as the scientists call it. You can call it 10 degrees to 25 degrees Celsius, or 25 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius, or 50 degrees, whatever it is. Different places have different ranges of tolerance. Different species have different ranges of tolerance in which they exist. Once that range goes out of whack, you have no ecosystem. You have no life. And that is why we need to build these catalytic partnerships, and that's what we do at the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. We work for free. We are a free organization, and I'm so proud that in my organization we have 10% employees, 90% volunteers, and volunteers that are not just a picture on a website, volunteers that contribute hundreds of hours every week, and I'm a volunteer myself. And we are so proud that we are able to spare not just the thought or the words, but the time and the action for saving the human species. I don't want to be pretentious and tell you that let's save the planet. There's nothing more arrogant than that. The planet does not need saving. We need saving. The planet will be fine after we are gone. Make no mistakes about that. It is the humans who are the problem. And we, the problem, need to become the solution. So let me go back to sharing with you a few stories that will perhaps give you some ideas of what is possible. The year was 2016. I was heading the UN's Red Plus program office based out of Indonesia. It was a special office created by 10 UN organizations by the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And I was actually quitting the UN at that time because I thought this whole arrangement where a government pays money to another government doesn't work. And mind you, I was in charge of that office for 4 years. At the end of 4 years, I said, this doesn't work. So Norway promised $1 billion to Brazil and $1 billion to Indonesia, and a little bit more to different countries for them to do what is right, to keep their forests, count the carbon, and basically make sure that there is no further deforestation, and so that they can be paid for keeping the carbon stock, in very simple layperson terms. Brazil got the $1 billion, so all credit to Norway. Brazil got the $1 billion because under President Lula, they had already done, and they were getting paid for doing something they had already accomplished. In Indonesia, the $1 billion was promised so that the action can happen, so that when it happened, they will get the money. The moment you put the money up front, then everything gets messed up. Too many opinions, too many ideas, too many conversations, the bureaucracy, everything becomes a toxic mix. And despite the best efforts of 2 presidents, and I have the greatest admirations for both the presidents, they're good friends, President Yudhoyono at that time in 2010, and President Jokowi, who's still president, it didn't work out. Because the bureaucracy is the problem. They can't think straight. So in 2016, I quit. We set up something called the Tropical Landscape Finance Facility. We said, let's see if private finance can do public good. Because public finance doesn't do public good. I had already seen it for 4 years. Within 6 months, working together with a whole bunch of partners, ADM Capital, BNP Paribas, the European Bank, Michelin, the tire company, we produced the world's largest, and still remains the largest, private investment in forests, $400 million, without any government putting a single penny of subsidy. Just changing the narrative. So now they have the world's largest sustainable rubber plantation around a 400,000 hectare forest, rainforest, like the Amazons, very diverse. One of the richest flora and fauna on the planet. It's called the Bukit Tigapulu forest, 6 times the size of the country Singapore. And 6 years later, it is one of the most profitable ventures, which at that time people said, this doesn't work. There's no way this is going to work. And we actually went to the market, capital market, and raised the money at costs below the sovereign borrowing cost of Indonesia, without any sovereign guarantees from Indonesia whatsoever. And 50,000 people get employed in that project, directly and indirectly. So if you create these people-planet partnerships, it works. But it doesn't work if your sole motive is shareholder profits. It doesn't work. It has to be stakeholder profits. And once you make people part of your conversation and your arrangements, it works. We took the same idea to India, to a state called Andhra Pradesh. It's a state of 55 million people on the east coast of India. And this engagement started in 2017 to turn the entire state to natural farming. And mind you, they have 6 million farmers. This is not convincing 5 farmers, you should do some good stuff. This is 6 million farmers. And as of now, they have already converted 1 million farmers. How? A lot of things. But principally, we brought together 50 different organizations to work with them. So with 50 organizations comes a diverse set of ideas, a lot of minds, a lot of goodwill. Last year, the German Development Bank put in 300 million euros into that project. And can you imagine how much is the interest rate? 0.5%. Not even the World Bank lends you at those rates. That's the power of partnerships. That's when so the true genius in these times is not an individual genius anymore. A true genius is a collaborative genius. So all of us coming together, putting our minds and hearts into an idea that upfront seems impossible, but actually becomes possible because you take a big problem, you break it into manageable parts, and each of the partner picks up a part and then works on it. And then together, suddenly it becomes possible. It's like any big problem. And also humility. Einstein famously said that we do not even know, for all our knowledge and science, we do not even know 1,000th of what nature has to offer. So I truly believe, not for rhetorical saying, but I truly believe that nature is the greatest inventor. Mother Nature is the greatest provider. There's no bigger nurturing than Mother Nature that does for us. Only if we get off our high horses, make ourselves a little humble, see ourselves as part of the web of life that consists of 8 million species, not just us, We think everything exists for us. It doesn't. And the moment we do that, there's a new awakening. Then we see everybody else as not somebody who's out to take a share of our profits, but somebody who's out to collaborate and make something bigger happen. Then we become greater than the sum of our parts. That's the power of partnerships. So lastly, I'll close by saying that each one of you in this room and those that you know outside have the power to be a champion. So if you have a great idea, come speak to my good friend Sergio or write to us. We will work with you, and it's all for free. You don't have to spend a penny. That's our business model. You will never spend a penny. You will never pay us for anything. And I say this openly everywhere I speak so that there is no doubt in anybody's mind. And we will work with you and make sure you succeed, because it is in your success lies the future of the human species. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask you to take a seat. So the name of this panel is the power of cooperation, and Satya really addressed it in a beautiful way. So this global alliance with these 50 different companies and organizations working together in order to find better solutions for the challenges that we're facing. Most of the people working in as volunteers, and it's not like anyone, it's like the brightest people on earth. So it's a great example of how we can get together in order to face the big challenges that we're having. So now I have the honor to call on stage two people that are really making a difference in the world. And we're going to have a conversation, a debate, the three of them, and I'm going to be the moderator for that. So let's give a hand for Michel Bauwens And Dina Storey, he made the Commons Manifest and talking about the new social dynamic, both politics and economical, that face capitalism challenges. Please, Michael, welcome. And Dina Storey, she works at the Energy Utility and Resources Company of Middle East, and she was the head of the sustainability development of the Dubai Expo. So we have amazing people here, and we're going to start this debate with Mr. Satya. It's an honor to have you all here. Thank you so much. So the first thing, well, we are talking about collaboration, cooperation. So the first question I have, first for Michel, that is doing manifests and helping people in order to get organized to have solutions. My first question is, why the crime is so well organized and the peace is not? I mean, the mafias, they're really structured. And once we come to the beautiful people that are doing beautiful work, they're usually going in different paths and are not really organized yet. So, and also I'd like to ask if the public solutions are more important, or the social, civil solutions are having to take place. So what are your thoughts about that?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and we can't really see you very well from here, but I recognize a few people from yesterday. Yes, so I think one way of looking at it is to look at, humanity always has two aspects, competition and cooperation. And the question is, what is primary and what is secondary? And we have organized our world since about 400 years ago from the point of view of competition is primary, and you cooperate within a competitive entity. So the mafia is very cooperative internally, but is very exploitative externally. And, maybe some people don't agree with this, but a lot of companies basically have quite a similar way of thinking about the world, right? They're like football teams competing with each other. But there's another way to look at this, which is if you take into account the existence of the commons. So throughout history, there have been three institutions, not two. And within the Western world and the Western paradigm, which became the global paradigm, the basic idea is we have to choose between the public and the private. And no, that's not true. There is a third factor, which is self-organized civic society. If you would have lived in the Middle Ages in Portugal, for example, 98% of the people would have been part of an organization that was self-organized with their own judges and their own leaders. And so the way they organized was around a concept of the commons, a mutual property that was for everybody within that particular organization. So like a guild, or the farmers that had access to, they had their own land for the family, the land of the Lord, and then the land that they could use together. And actually the most important Catholic ritual was not Christmas and Easter. It was called Rogentide Procession, where all the villagers would go around the village and reaffirm their commons. This is us. So their identity was primarily determined by the fact that they had things in common. Now, we've pretty much eliminated this factor in Western society. It's still quite alive in the South, but certainly in the West we don't know about it because we think private sector is the best. And this may sound weird, but because of the internet, we have created a capacity of global non-territorial coordination. And I think what you just talked about is really an example of that, right? So I sometimes call it peak hierarchy, because before we were working together in small villages where we knew everyone, but as soon as we scaled up, we had armies and centralized companies, but now we can scale cooperation, and I think this is different. So lots of people in different places can now work together and create very powerful civic institutions which I think are preservative and regenerative, and can be a counterpower to more extractive-oriented institutions that want to grow and make profit. So I think that's the big change today, is that we can think about this third factor. Sorry if I talk so long, but yeah.
No, it's great. Dina, I'd like to ask your point of view as when you're doing such big thing as, for instance, the Expo. And there are so many sponsors and interests, and also, you know, there's the common interest. So how can you deal with all that, making it sustainable and yet, you know, something that's going to lead people through a different form of facing the challenges?
Thank you so much. I think, first of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you for everyone who showed up. I know there was a problem with the trains and everything, so thank you. I think when you look at something like an Expo, it has its benefits. The fact that you are bringing countries together in one place, and it doesn't involve war, and it doesn't involve anything that has to do with conflict. It's about bringing together innovation. The World Expo has been going on since, I think, 1858. The first one started in Crystal Palace in London, and so every 5 years there's an expo. This one was the first one to be held in the Middle East, so it had some importance because, first of all, it was in the Middle East, and second of all, it was the first expo after the pandemic. We had to postpone it for 1 year, and it was the first time that people came together after the pandemic in a space, in a physical space. So we had about 192 countries. That's the majority of the world's countries convening in one place. And it's about soft power, soft diplomacy, about the countries coming together for the greater good. The theme of the Expo is Connecting Minds, Creating the Future, which is very much into the collaborative space that we're talking about. And in a time where we know, as Satya was saying, the world is really facing a big challenge when it comes to climate change. This place was a place for convergence to discuss these matters and debate them in a way that made sense. When we talk about sustainability, a lot of people say to me, well, you're in Dubai, you know, there's all this oil and you can't be sustainable there. Well, the reality is you can. Wherever you are, you can put together certain policies, procedures, you can bring people together to actually change their minds, but also change the perception, which is quite important. The perception of how we view another country is important, because we can't collaborate if we perceive them to be oil-rich, or they don't believe in sustainability, or all of these other things that I have personally heard. As a woman working in the Middle East, I can tell you that perception change is the only way that we can bring the world together. We have COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh coming up literally in a couple of weeks, and we have COP28 next year, and I was just at Climate Week, where everyone was coming together talking about the same topic. And sometimes you just wonder, they're all talking, how can we have some actions? The reality is there are actions happening, but again, the perception of what we are conveying sometimes doesn't come through. Case in point, when you were talking about collaboration and bringing together funds for the greater good, if you look at the enormity of this people-planet partnership, as you mentioned, how all of that came together during the past few years, just to resolve some of the pandemic's problems, and now looking at climate change and saying, okay, we have to think of this differently. We can't just depend on the leaders who are just sitting there and talking. We have to do something ourselves. And one of the things I heard at Climate Week in New York really resonated with me. We have to be realistic about our challenges and optimistic about our sulutions. And we have to come together to be able to be optimistic, but also be non-judgmental about the other, so that we can collaborate in a better way. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I totally agree that we got to be optimistical And you really nailed it when you said that it was about soft power and beautiful things. But Satya had brought some very realistic point of view of the things that we are facing in a very short time. And so how could we, as a global alliance, really of these people from science, from arts, from all kinds of structure, places from society, how can we really address the solutions and have the companies and the interests that are blocking the real changes to happen in order to make the game changer that we need? Satya, please.
I'll highlight. Three things I'll highlight. The first is that we have to understand that climate change is a man-made problem. And when I say man-made, I'm talking gender, not man includes woman. Because women never had a seat at the table. So women didn't make these decisions, 99.9%. It is a man-made problem. So it is time for men to really own up to what has, and I'm not talking global north, global south. Wherever men had power, these decisions have been made. So that we really need to acknowledge and understand and be, as Dina said, non-judgmental, be humble, and drop our vanity and ego for a bit, and just sit around the table and discuss what can we do together. That's the first thing. The second is that big ideas are great, but all ideas need money to be implemented. So we need to find innovative finance models to make things work. I'll go back to the project with Michelin we talked about. When Michelin first went to market with their joint venture to try and raise the money in US dollar, the money that was not even being offered but being talked about was 12% per annum. What they finally got was under 6%. So when we talked to Michelin to do this, they said, we can do all of it, no problem. But if I'm paying 12% interest, this project does not work for us. I simply cannot make it happen. When it becomes 6%, I can certainly make it happen. So don't go with fixed ideas or billing people by the hour. Just say, I'm going to help. And then look at the whole checkerboard of challenges, pick up one, solve it, then the next. Don't let the entire checkerboard overwhelm you. Oh, this is checkmate. I can't even start. I'm going to lose. Why start? No, I'm going to win no matter what. And then you pick up one little piece. You find a partner, you find a solution. Then go to the next, and the next, and the next. And suddenly you realize in a few months, you actually have a checkerboard of solutions, not problems. And that's what works every time like a charm. And the third thing is that let's stop blaming everybody. The North did this to us, the South is this, or these people eat too much and those people are too poor. That doesn't help. And I really like what the Pope said in the Laudato Si. The one thing that caught my attention was that the poor do not need charity. They need dignity, so that they can make their own decisions. So the moment we have the so-called poor, whether you call them countries or people, whatever, a seat at the table, but a seat with respect and dignity, that we have a common problem, let us talk together and see how we can solve it together. Until then, we'll talk sideways, and we'll not have solutions. And without solutions, we are lost. And I can't say that strongly enough, because I have been at the table for too long and I know what I'm talking. Until last year, I was heading the UN's Environment Management Group. I know the science, I know what is happening, I know the politics and the policy and the science of climate change. We are in a really bad place. We all need to dumb down a little bit in terms of our vanity, our ego, our arrogance, and look at possibilities. And the power is in possibilities. The power is in collaboration. The power is in cooperating with each other. That's when things will happen and happen at scale.
Thank you. Yeah, we need that. I'll highlight two things that you said. First, we should drop all the blame game and start going for solutions. And also, he said something very important, which is letting the women be part of the negotiation tables.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have, different view, especially a view of caring, really caring when you say nurturing, and the female energy is really welcome to the solution table. So thank you for that. So I'll ask Michael, how can we use the technologies and the peer-to-peer solutions in order to include everyone in this global, negotiation table and bring everyone into the plan?
Well, I wish I had a perfect solution, but very broadly speaking, in the people I work with around the commons and peer-to-peer dynamics, we talk about cosmolocalism. And so there's two aspects to it. The first thing is that you cannot solve any pollution problem without working locally. Like matter degrades locally and you have to heal it locally. So that's the local part. But actually, that's not enough, because today, for example, you can be fisheries communities in Gambia and decide to be sustainable. But as long as you have a big ship, fishing, overfishing over the national miles, you're still not good, right? So cosmolocal really is the key to work at the two levels at the same time. And so we talk about the principle, everything that's heavy is local, and everything that's light is global and shared. So today we're spending 3 times more transporting things than making things. And the default option today is we buy everything from abroad, except if we can, and if we can find it abroad, we make it ourselves. So you'll find many places that have 90% imports and only 10% production, local production. And this we have to overturn again. We have to really say, it's called subsidiarity, material subsidiarity, is everything that we can do locally, we do locally, and what we can find locally, we get from somewhere else. So we have to get back to the other default option. And so the way I imagine things and the way the people that I observe are pioneers are doing it is distributed local production on demand. So imagine you have a micro factory where, for example, you make transport vehicles. You don't make 10,000. You basically have a set of machines that can make a bus or truck on demand. It can be electrical truck, it can be biodegradable, it can be circular. But so you don't have, so what we do, we do mass production and then we try to sell it. And all these models are obsolete. They're not compatible with a sustainable society. So again, everything that's heavy is local, everything that's light is global and shared. And this is really a new civilization, because civilization was a way for mankind to survive climate change 5,000 years ago by mastering nature. And we've come at the end of that model. So we have to reimagine. I think social justice is important, right? So the social contract that we had after World War II, only in the West, between capital and labor, has to become global. And the second thing is we need a social contract with the web of life. And that's, Satya speaks very well about this. We are interdependent, and so there's nothing we can do to solve the issue if we only look at humanity. We have to look at the whole ecosystem.
Dina, I would like to ask you to share some inspiring people that, have been a good influence in you, like authors, because we are also streaming it. So maybe for the audience which is home, so people that they can research and be inspired of, would you share some of these guiding people of your history?
Thank you so much. I think just to add to Michael's point when he talked about thinking or creating local industries, and then, only the light things would come from overseas. From a Middle East perspective, it is 90% import. So when the pandemic hit, that exactly what you were saying kind of hit home. So you see that paradigm change that is happening right now, whereby local innovations are coming to play within the region. And the region is mostly young. It's about 80% young, from the age of, up to the age, of 29 years old. So it's a very young region. And so you see these innovations now coming and saying, hey, we want to be local. So that, just to add to that, as far as who inspires me, I mean, there's so many women, Maya Angelou, to say the least. Pope Francis, the Laudato Si program that you mentioned, with that I've been lucky to be able to at least see with my own eyes. Jeffrey Sachs, who is my mentor. Again, we have so many that inspire us. But to me, I think that the people that really inspire me are the women who are creating a community, who are going out and doing cleanups or doing something local, as you put it. And I've seen so many of these women that I personally have worked with, both in the Middle East region, in Africa, and across the world. So you can find inspiration not necessarily in the books you read, but also in the neighbor next door, and see what they're doing, and in the community next door, and learn from them. I learned a very important lesson from a woman. I'm originally from Iraq, so I'm from Baghdad. I've gone through all of these wars, and we had this neighbor, and all she did was cook and give to the community. We were in ration times. And I always wondered where she got all of this food from, because we had no food. And I realized that she was growing her own garden and putting things together and fed all the neighbors. And so to me, that's inspiration. So we can talk about the Maya Angelou's and the Obamas and all of these people, but you don't really have to look for inspiration. It can be your neighbor next door.
Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing, and that's true, so true. And yeah, so how to be the example and to be able to identify it in the neighborhood, in everyone who is really doing, exchanging the good practices of doing that. And how can we do it in a global perspective? And how can we share to each other this? Satya said beautiful things about being humble, getting out of the arrogance, and so as leaders that we all are, how can we set these new perspectives and share these new ways of relating and coming together?
It's interesting that Dina mentioned it, because true inspiration is actually very close to us. When I talked about this natural farming program in India, where 1 million farmers have converted to natural farming from very harmful agrochemicals and pesticides, and it's all natural, it's not organic, so they don't spend a lot of money with the compost and everything else. It's a process of bioinoculation. So they use cow dung and cow urine as microbes, and they use some accelerants that then enhances the microbial property of the substance, and then they use it to coat the seeds, spray the soil, and protect the plants through biosubstances, and their yields have gone up anywhere between 28% to 200%. And the cost of agriculture has dropped by 50% at least. And you know who's doing this? Women. It's the women farmers. Almost 1 million of them, because not all are women farmers, about 80-20. And every time I go there, that's my inspiration. I give them a hug, and I say, Mother, you are the best mother I can ever meet. And and I say this with all my heart. Because these are people whose resilience is this little. Yesterday, Sergio talked about resilience. Resilience is this little. They live between what they make in one crop cycle to the next crop cycle. Their life, their children's life, their family, health, everything depends on it. And they are willing to change. They are willing to risk everything. And we, the so-called intelligent people, we're talking about, we create this whole, Gunter beautifully put it yesterday, analysis leading to paralysis, And it's this whole net zero business is a joke. Honestly, it's a joke. We keep talking about in 2050, we'll all be net zero. And somebody put out a nice joke on the net zero. He said, until 2048, I'll keep borrowing or I'll keep drinking, and then I'll leave 2 years for myself to get healthy again. It doesn't work like that. Not for the ecosystems, not for people, not for the species. So we need to take these small people, as we call them, people on the margins of the society, and be inspired by what they do every day. And then bring these stories to other parts of the world. A few months ago, the Indonesian Minister for Spatial Planning with a cabinet-level delegation came and met these women farmers. They're trying to copy it and see how we can do it in Indonesia. There's a whole group of farmers and farmer leaders went from Latin America to meet these women farmers and see how we can transplant these ideas. Agroecology Fund has just published a book on that, on what you can do. So the ideas are there, They're happening all over the world. I shared a few examples from Indonesia or India or the Caribbean or Africa, but there are thousands of such good things that are happening. We need to find them, we need to empower them, we need to incubate those ideas. People often talk about pilots. Pilots don't fail because people put a lot of money into it, but pilots never scale because you will never find grant money. We need to find a way to work with business. There's nothing wrong with making money. It's great because that gives you motivation, more power to you. I want you to make money actually, if that motivates you. But then do 10 times more good with the same money. And it's possible. So scaling is possible. Scaling is the only way to go, and there is enough money. If you look at the pension funds of the world, if you take just the top 300 pension funds, that's $18 trillion. If you put aside 5% of that money for sustainable investments, that's $900 billion. I'm not talking million. That's how much money can become available if we work together and make the risk just go away, because the risk is there because people don't work together. If you work together from an idea to the feedstock, to the factory, to the supply chain, to who's buying it, if you bring everything together, there is no risk. And you'll find all the money to invest. But the power is in working together.
Yeah, we also need to change the narrative, as we believe that the industrialized things are, we still, as a global society, believes that this is a better, more developed, and when you see that really there are some, like, I'll give you an example. In Brazil, you go to a little town in Amazon, and they have this beautiful, juices from amazing tropical fruits, but they still want to go and buy a soft drink. Why? Because the narrative tells that the developed, the cutting edge thing is something that it's really not. So what we are all talking about here is that changing the mindset and realizing that the things that we have close to us in our neighborhoods, in our societies, made in familiar agriculture and so forth and so on, they could be really the game changer. But in order to do that, we truly need to work in the narrative together and going from competing to really collaborating, cooperating. And for that, we really need places like these to come up with ideas and have amazing people talking about that. I'm so sorry to say that we are running out of time, so I'll ask everyone of you to give your final words, and thank you so much for being in this one with us. Dina, please.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and I think if I leave you with one final word is to be kind. In a world that's always full of conflict, and we see it on the news, just be kind to each other. And I think that that's the message that needs to go out to the world.
You're kind. It's nice to listen. Even your voice is kind, so it's beautiful. Thank you, Dina. Michel?
Well, so I think we need a lot of experimentation, but we also need to learn from other people. And in the wiki.p2pfoundation.net, we have 23,000 projects, really existing projects in every field, like transportation, housing, etc. And so what I urge people to do is to, when you start something, also learn from other people who've been doing the same thing, right? So one of the ways of scaling is actually co-learning, and we don't do that enough. Everybody's reinventing the wheel so many times. So you talked about genius, that it's collective, and so Brian Eno calls this senius, right? Every genius comes from a senius, from a kind of collective culture that promoted these particular talented individuals. So look for your seniors. Look where is the seniors where you can thrive and learn from others.
Thank you. Satya, please, your final words.
I think we need to work very well with young people because they have amazing ideas. They are full of energy, positive energy and enthusiasm. And they actually, unlike the adults, they don't hate each other so much. So there's much more affection and love and recognition and respect for each other among young people. The willingness to listen to each other. So I think that's where the true genius is, because they are willing to listen to each other. All the top companies and the big money that you see, coming out of Silicon Valley or in other parts of the world, it is a collaborative of a few young people. There is no one founder. You always see a bunch of co-founders, Somebody brings in imagination, some brings in technology, some brings in money, and they all come together and produce something so wonderful. So let's listen to young people and be their voice, because we are very patronizing when we talk to young people. It comes from being a parent because you think you know better, But we need to drop that parent bit a little bit and see ourselves as young equals in the room. So if we know more than them, yes, we have a right to speak. Otherwise, we shut up and listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank everyone for being here. So let's end this beautiful morning with this message of not only being change makers, but peacemakers, and being inspired by the youth who comes out of this loving energy and bringing it to all our action. Thank you very much.
Thank you.